Woonsocket, Rhode Island, was a quiet town, the kind of place where people went about their business without much thought to danger lurking in the shadows. But between 2003 and 2004, something sinister took hold of the city. Women began disappearing, women who lived on the edge of society, who were often overlooked, but who had lives and stories of their own. Audrey Harris was one of them. In her younger years, she had been full of promise. She played the piano at church, dreamed of becoming a nurse, and had a natural talent for caregiving. But life did not unfold the way she had hoped. She struggled with addiction, and by the time she reached her 40s, she was living a life that many had given up trying to understand. She was known to walk the streets, making just enough money to survive, but those who truly knew her never saw her as just another statistic. Then, in April 2003, she vanished without a trace. Months passed and Audrey's case remained unsolved. Her family held on to hope, but deep down, they feared the worst. Then, a year later, another woman went missing, Christine Dumont. At 42, Christine had lived a life that had once been full of warmth. She had 2 children, had worked as a home aide, and loved baking. But like Audrey, she struggled with addiction, a battle that eventually led her to the streets. On May 3rd, 2004, Christine was last seen standing on a Woonsocket street corner. She never came home. By this time, the police began to see a pattern, though they had no suspects. The women who were disappearing were all known to have been involved in sex work and drug use. It was a dangerous lifestyle, one that put them at risk every day. When July 2004 came around, yet another woman went missing, 25-year-old Stacy Goulet. Unlike the others, Stacy was still young, still filled with dreams of leaving Rhode Island for something better. She had family who worried about her, but no one could convince her to change her life. Then one night, she simply disappeared. Her boyfriend reported her missing, but the response was the same as before. Another woman lost to the streets. Another case without leads. Investigators were frustrated. They had no bodies, no crime scenes, no evidence of foul play beyond the eerie similarities in the disappearances. But then, the break they needed finally came. An anonymous caller tipped off the police, telling them to talk to a woman named Jocelyn Martel. Unlike the others, Jocelyn had survived. She described a chilling encounter with a man who had picked her up, taken her to his house, and then attacked her. She had barely escaped, fighting him off just long enough to run out the door. She had never reported the attack, convinced that the police wouldn't care because of the life she led. But now she realized she might have been lucky. The women who went missing might have faced the same man, but they hadn't made it out alive. Jocelyn didn't know her attacker's name, but she remembered his house. She described its color, the shutters, the way the front door looked. With this information, the police were able to track down an address, and with it, a name, Jeff Mailhot. At first glance, he seemed like the last person to be involved in anything sinister. He was 33 years old, worked in a factory, and had no criminal record, not even a speeding ticket. But when investigators dug deeper, they found something chilling. Another woman had been attacked at his home. Tess Morris had barely survived her encounter with Mailhot. She had been invited in for a drink, and before she even had a chance to react, he had wrapped his arm around her throat, choking the life out of her. She struggled, pleaded, promised she wouldn't say anything, and for some reason, he let her go. She never reported it, just like Jocelyn. She had believed no one would care. With 2 living victims telling nearly identical stories, the police knew they had their suspect. They obtained a warrant and on July 16, 2004, knocked on Mailhot's door. At first, he was calm, composed. He denied everything. But the detectives had a strategy. They laid out 3 photographs, Audrey Harris, Christine Dumont, and Stacy Goulet. They watched his reaction closely. His hands shook, his breathing changed. Then he made a critical mistake. He blurted out, "You guys think I killed these girls?" No one had mentioned murder. Until that moment, the women were simply missing. That statement sealed his fate. For over an hour, detectives pushed Mailhot for the truth. He resisted, then broke down. He confessed to what they had feared all along. He had lured these women into his home, strangled them, and then dismembered their bodies in his bathtub. He packed their remains into black trash bags and dumped them in the city's dumpsters, treating their lives as disposable. The confession was shocking, but it wasn't enough for the prosecution. The bodies were still missing, and without physical evidence, a conviction wasn't guaranteed. The search for the remains led investigators to the Woonsocket landfill. It was an overwhelming task, mountains of trash, an endless sea of debris. For 6 days, they sifted through the waste, finding nothing. Then, on the 7th day, they uncovered a small black bag wrapped in duct tape. Inside, they found what was left of Stacy Goulet: a scalp, crushed bones, pieces of a life that had been violently taken. There was no doubt. They had found one of Mailhot's victims. Audrey Harris and Christine Dumont were never recovered. Their families were left without closure, but they knew the truth. The man responsible had confessed. He had taken their lives and disposed of them like garbage. There was no happy ending, but at least justice was within reach. On February 15, 2005, Jeff Mailhot stood before the court and pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of assault. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, plus an additional 10 years. It wasn't enough to erase the pain he had caused, but it ensured that he would never walk free again. His family refused to speak publicly. He never showed remorse. He never apologized. For the families of the victims, there was no satisfaction, only the bitter knowledge that their daughters, sisters, and mothers had suffered in their final moments. But they took some comfort in knowing that Mailhot would never hurt another woman. He would die behind bars, alone. Jeff Mailhot was sent to the Rhode Island Adult Correctional Institution, where he remains to this day. The streets of Woonsocket may have forgotten his name, but the families of Audrey, Christine, and Stacy never will. Their stories remain as a reminder that even those living on the margins of society deserve justice, and that sometimes the most unassuming monsters walk among us, hiding in plain sight. Despite Jeff Mailhot's arrest and conviction, the wounds he left behind in Woonsocket were far from healed. Families of the victims struggled with grief that never faded, knowing their loved ones had suffered horrific deaths. But more than that, the lingering questions haunted them. How many others had fallen victim to him? Were Audrey Harris and Christine Dumont the only ones still lost, or were there more women out there, nameless, unreported, discarded just as cruelly? The landfill search had ended when Stacy Goulet's remains were recovered, but investigators privately admitted that it was impossible to be certain they had found everything. The landfill was massive, a constantly shifting graveyard of discarded waste. Any remains left undiscovered would eventually be buried beneath new layers of garbage, lost forever. Detectives knew the chances of finding Audrey and Christine were slim. They had tried, but in the end, the city's trash had swallowed them whole. In the years that followed, their families would visit the cemetery where empty headstones stood in their honor, marking lives stolen but never fully put to rest. Audrey's younger sister, Melissa, spoke in interviews about the anger that never left her. She remembered the nights when Audrey would sit at the piano, lost in the music, before her life spiraled into addiction. She wasn't just some woman on the streets, Melissa said. She was a person. She mattered. Christine Dumont's children, now adults, carried the weight of her absence. They had once hoped she would recover, that she would find her way back to them. Instead, they were left with the pain of not even having a body to bury. At least Stacy's family has something, Christine's daughter, Vanessa, once said. All I have is a missing persons case that I know will never be solved." Mailhot, locked away in the Rhode Island Adult Correctional Institution, never showed remorse. In the first years of his sentence, he refused all interviews. He lived in isolation, avoiding interactions with other inmates. Whether it was out of fear or indifference, no one could say. But then, in 2011, he agreed to speak with a journalist who had been covering the case for years. What he revealed was chilling. When asked why he had killed, Mailhot's response was disturbingly simple: "I don't know. I just wanted to." He showed no emotion, no regret. He admitted that the first time he choked a woman, it hadn't been planned. It had been an impulse. But once he realized how easy it was, how quickly he could take a life without anyone noticing, he did it again. And again. When pressed on whether there were more victims, his answer was a quiet maybe. That single word sent shivers through the investigators who had worked the case. If he had killed more, they might never know. The only reason they had caught him was because 2 women survived. How many others had never made it out of that house? Over the years, cold case detectives revisited missing persons files, searching for women who fit the same pattern: sex workers, drug users, women whose disappearances had gone largely unnoticed. They combed through arrest records, looking for anyone who had last been seen in Woonsocket before vanishing. But without bodies, without evidence, there was little they could do. The victims' families continued to push for answers. They fought to have Mailhot questioned again, hoping that with time he might confess to more. But he remained silent. He was serving life in prison, and he had nothing left to lose. He had no reason to tell the truth. Meanwhile, Woonsocket itself tried to move on. The city had always been small, but after the case, it felt even smaller. For years, women working the streets had whispered about the disappearances, warning each other to be careful. Now the whispers carried a different weight. The monster who had hunted them was behind bars, but the fear never fully left. Forensic psychologists studied Mailhot's case, comparing him to other serial killers. He didn't fit the usual profile. He wasn't charismatic like Ted Bundy. He wasn't a drifter like Henry Lee Lucas. He was just a quiet man, blending into the background, someone no one would have suspected. That was what made him so dangerous. He wasn't extraordinary. He was disturbingly normal. As the years passed, Mailhot became just another inmate, his story fading from headlines. But for the families of his victims, time did not bring closure. It only deepened the loss. Without bodies, without the ability to properly grieve, they were left in a kind of limbo. And every so often, another woman would go missing somewhere in Rhode Island. Another case would be opened. Another family would start searching for answers. Each time, detectives would ask themselves the same question, the one they had asked since the day Mailhot was arrested. Was there another victim out there? And if so, would she ever be found? As time went on, the case of Jeff Mailhot became another grim chapter in Woonsocket's history, but for the families of his victims, it was never truly over. Life moved forward, but the pain remained. Every anniversary of their disappearances brought back fresh wounds, reopening questions that would never be answered. For the families of Audrey Harris and Christine Dumont, the lack of a body meant there was no true closure. They visited memorial plaques instead of graves, lighting candles for loved ones whose final resting places were unknown. They lived with the torment of not knowing whether a part of them still lay buried beneath the endless waste of the landfill, mixed in with the forgotten refuse of the city. Their pain was made worse by the fact that Mailhot, the only person who knew the full truth, refused to speak. He never admitted to more murders. He never told them what had happened in those last moments. He had stolen their lives, and then he had stolen the truth. Mailhot's case led to some changes in how law enforcement handled missing persons cases, particularly when it came to women in high-risk lifestyles. Police departments across Rhode Island quietly began reevaluating old files, looking for other cases that might match Mailhot's pattern. Over the years, new protocols were introduced, ensuring that women like Audrey, Christine, and Stacy weren't ignored simply because of the lives they lived. Advocacy groups pushed for more resources for women struggling with addiction, hoping to prevent them from becoming easy targets for predators like Mailhot. But for every small step forward, there were always reminders of how much still needed to be done. Years passed and the name Jeff Mailhot became a shadow, a story mothers told their daughters as a warning. He remained behind bars, a forgotten figure to most, but to the people of Woonsocket, his crimes were not forgotten. They had changed the city. The fear he created left scars that time could never erase. Even as Mailhot aged in prison, the chilling thought remained. This case serves as a reminder that justice, even when served, is never truly enough. The families of the victims deserve more answers, more compassion, more action. If you or someone you know has information about a missing person, don't wait. Speak up. Report it. Because silence is what allows monsters to walk free. And for those who still wait for justice, every voice counts.
In 1998, Bonnie Baker, a 47-year-old resident of Denver, Colorado, was living with her boyfriend, Crespin Nene Perez. Bonnie was employed at a restaurant in Morrison, Colorado. In June of that year, the couple attended a celebration with friends in honor of Bonnie's recent pay raise. During the festivities, Crespin became upset when he saw Bonnie dancing with others, prompting them to leave the gathering together. Before departing, Bonnie expressed to a friend, "It would be better if I just go now, or it'd be worse." Later that evening, a 911 call was made, reporting that a woman had been found deceased in her apartment on West Louisiana Avenue. The caller alleged that Crespin was responsible and was en route to Mexico with Bonnie's body in the trunk of his vehicle, intending to dispose of it along the way. Authorities promptly arrived at the couple's shared apartment, where they discovered shattered glass and overturned furniture. The neighbor who made the call recounted that Crespin had ominously stated, "Something bad happened to us. You will never have to see Bonnie again because I'm going to make her disappear." This led investigators to conclude that an argument had escalated, resulting in Bonnie's tragic death at the hands of Crespin. Following the incident, he reportedly placed her body in his car and fled towards Mexico, as described by the neighbor. Despite efforts to locate either Bonnie or Crespin, they were unsuccessful. The neighbor provided a description of Crespin's vehicle, which was later identified in a crash near Globe, Arizona, 2 days later. Although the driver escaped, a witness recognized Crespin from a photo lineup. The vehicle was impounded, and blood evidence was collected from the trunk. In July 1999, over a year after Bonnie's disappearance, 2 boys on horseback in Navajo territory near Manuelito, New Mexico, stumbled upon a human skull, leading the Navajo Nation tribal police to uncover additional skeletal remains in the vicinity. An autopsy did not succeed in identifying the individual, yet it was established that the remains were those of a female. These remains were subsequently transferred to the New Mexico office of the medical investigator for safekeeping until advancements in DNA technology would allow for further analysis. By October 2012, significant progress had been made in DNA technology. Police detective Kenneth Klaus, who had been dedicated to Bonnie's case since 1998, reached out to an agent from the Federal Bureau of Investigation in New Mexico to discuss her mysterious disappearance. The agent recalled the female remains discovered in 1999 and suspected they might belong to Bonnie. DNA samples from the skeletal remains were sent to Denver, where they were successfully matched with samples from Bonnie. In 2013, investigators concluded that sufficient evidence existed to charge Crespin. However, he was residing in Mexico at that time, making his extradition to Colorado a complex endeavor. It took 7 years to successfully return him to the United States. In May 2020, Crespin, along with several other fugitives, was surrendered to American authorities by the Mexican government. Preliminary hearings commenced, during which Crespin's family provided testimony regarding his violent behavior. Currently, there is no update on the trial schedule, but it is believed that investigators have amassed enough evidence to ensure a conviction. Hidden beneath the surface of the mystery surrounding Mary Schlais lies a tapestry of dark secrets. A gifted artist whose vibrant life was tragically extinguished on a fateful February day in 1974, Mary's story is one of both talent and tragedy. A violent encounter with a stranger left an enduring enigma that lingered for nearly 50 years. While pursuing her artistic dreams through hitchhiking, her life was abruptly ended, a mystery that remained unsolved until recent forensic advancements finally illuminated the truth. Born on November 4, 1948, in the charming city of Minneapolis, Minnesota, Mary was the daughter of Arnold Benjamin Schlais and Louise Catherine Larson Schlais. From a young age, she radiated creativity and a spirited personality, which propelled her to the University of Minnesota, where she graduated with honors. A remarkable artist and an accomplished equestrian, Mary was a beacon of promise and potential, cherished by all who knew her for her artistic brilliance and compassionate heart. However, on February 15, 1974, tragedy struck. At the tender age of 25, Mary was discovered lifeless near an intersection in Spring Brook, Wisconsin, leaving her family and friends in a state of disbelief and sorrow. The grim determination of homicide was swiftly assigned to her death, deepening the anguish of those who loved her. The initial investigation revealed that Mary had been hitchhiking to an art exhibition in Chicago on that ill-fated day, a detail that provided a slender yet crucial lead in piecing together the events leading to her demise. Unfortunately, the absence of witnesses and substantial evidence stymied progress, and despite the relentless efforts of law enforcement, the case grew cold. For decades, detectives from various agencies dedicated themselves to unraveling the truth behind Mary's tragic end, pursuing countless leads and tips in the hope of finally achieving justice for a life so cruelly interrupted. Interviews were conducted with individuals who may have possessed knowledge regarding the circumstances surrounding her untimely demise. Despite these diligent inquiries, no credible suspects emerged. The absence of significant evidence left the case in a state of stagnation, and the pursuit of justice for Mary appeared increasingly elusive. Over the years, her case continued to captivate those resolute in their quest for answers. Law enforcement periodically revisited the evidence, harnessing the advancements in forensic technology. Yet despite their unwavering efforts, no significant breakthroughs materialized until the recent emergence of genetic genealogy, which opened a promising new pathway for investigation. In a determined pursuit of justice, the Dunn County Sheriff's Office forged a partnership with a team of genetic genealogists from Ramapo College in New Jersey. This collaboration centered on the meticulous analysis of DNA evidence gathered from the crime scene, including a crucial artifact, a hat discovered near Mary's remains. In November 2024, the genetic analysis yielded an astonishing breakthrough. Utilizing cutting-edge forensic techniques, the team identified a suspect in this decades-old mystery, 84-year-old John Keith Miller. The pivotal moment arrived when investigators found a hair on the hat left at the scene. DNA extracted from this hair matched Miller unequivocally, establishing a direct link to the homicide. The hat, later confirmed to be Miller's, became an instrumental piece of evidence in unraveling the enigma of Mary's tragic fate. Equipped With this newfound evidence, authorities located Miller in his apartment in Owatonna, Minnesota. After years of ambiguity and lingering questions, investigators finally had the chance to confront the individual responsible for Mary's death. During their interrogation, Miller confessed to his involvement in the 1974 homicide, marking a significant turning point in a case that had remained unresolved for nearly 5 decades. Throughout his interview, Miller recounted chilling details regarding the events that led to Mary's tragic end. Miller's criminal complaint reveals that he picked up a young hitchhiker en route to an art exhibition in Chicago. Following this seemingly innocuous encounter, he made inappropriate advances, soliciting sexual contact from Mary. When she declined his propositions, his demeanor shifted dramatically, culminating in a violent outburst. In a fit of rage, he retrieved a knife from within the vehicle and fatally stabbed her in the back, inflicting multiple wounds that underscored the brutality of the assault. Although Miller has confessed to the crime, a critical piece of evidence, the murder weapon, remains missing, complicating the case further. Nevertheless, his admission, coupled with DNA evidence, has equipped law enforcement with sufficient grounds to file charges against him. Miller now faces a first-degree homicide charge for the tragic death of Mary Kathleen Schlais in 1974. He is currently detained in Steele County, Minnesota, as legal proceedings commence. Authorities are actively working to facilitate his extradition to Dunn County, Wisconsin, where the heinous act occurred and where he will face trial. For the dedicated investigators who have labored on this case, Miller's arrest signifies the fruition of years of unwavering commitment. As he awaits extradition, Mary's family and the community that grieved her loss inch closer to the justice they seek. The family intends to hold a press conference shortly, expressing their heartfelt appreciation to law enforcement for their tireless efforts.